My name is Davis, and when I was in high school, I was a huge nerd. Now, I wasn't just any sort of nerd, I was a nerd in South Dakota. That's very different from being a nerd here. Here in Dallas, it seems like there's a lot of people. There's at least like more people who might be like you and more things to do with that. In South Dakota, where the cows outnumber the people, it's not very common to be a nerd. So I spent a lot of my time as a kid playing video games and kind of feeling lonely, hungry for some connection with people or others who would share the same interests as I did. And eventually I found that around middle school. I found a group of guys who were like me, who were nerds. And so I got full from that because I spent time with them. While everyone else was out watching sports or hunting or fishing or hanging out, we were in my friend's basement playing video games, screaming at each other. We were reenacting Star Wars scenes, and we were rolling dice for Dungeons and Dragons. After a time, though, I started to want a little bit more. I would hear the stories of other kids at school about the party they would be at, and I'd feel left out. I would see the couple holding hands in the hallway, and I'd feel a pang of jealousy, like that's something that I want too. And I would hear people talking about real things, real issues in the world, not just what Harry Potter movie is the best. It's clearly Goblet of Fire, number 4. But I wanted those things. I felt that hunger for connection. I felt that come up again. I wanted more. And so I devised a way to get it. I thought that if I can be popular, if I can make myself cool, then I'll get the people that I want. I'll have the relationships that I want. I'll be invited to the things that will fulfill me. And for me, that route was going to be through sports. I don't know if by looking at me you can tell. I'm not very sporty. I am especially not coordinated at all. As a kid, I had tried a lot of things. I spent my most time with baseball, and I still could not catch the ball for the life of me. 2 out of 3 times I would miss the ball and then get my coach mad at me. When I tried football, that was way too physical for me. I remember being down in front of this big kid named Danny Ellenbecker. He had hate in his eyes. I heard the word hut, and I got out of his way. Again, I didn't get put in front of him again, and I didn't do football again after that. But I figured there has to be a sport that I can do. I was skinny, I was in decent shape, I had a decent amount of endurance. And so I heard some kids talking about track. I was like, oh, I can do track, I can run. That can't be that hard. So I joined track and I slogged through the exhausting practices that made me feel like I was gonna die. I sat through the 12-hour meets where I ran one race and sat around the next time. And I really had no passion for it other than the drive to make the friends I wanted and to get to where I wanted to be in life. And it worked. I made the friends. I became popular. I even got nominated for Homecoming King eventually. And so it worked. But I noticed that hunger would still seep in. If it wasn't the group of people that I was hanging out with then I was wanting the next group and the next group. Or the night spent alone and wanted more. I had a hunger. I didn't know why. We all have a hunger. I've seen it not just in my life, but in other ways as well. I know people who have a hunger for a job that will finally satisfy them. They go from job to job thinking to themselves, this next one is going to be the thing that finally makes me happy. They get to the next job, they're happy with it for a while, and then something happens where they're dissatisfied. It might be a boss, a coworker, the pay. They're not happy with it, and they think, oh, maybe I'll find it here in another job. For myself and other people I know, going through periods of loneliness where just want someone to talk to and to fill this void inside. And so finally, we get into a relationship, and it's great. 3 months later, though, that feeling of loneliness creeps back in, even though nothing in the relationship has changed. Still other people, I see them buying the newest phones every single year that a new one comes out. And every single time they see a car that they want, they have to have that car. And they love it for a while. It's great. They show it off, enjoy it until the next thing comes out. And then they have to have that. And it's this endless cycle of always being hungry for more. The truth about these hungers is that they're not bad things. It's not bad to want hope, security, love, to feel included. It's not bad to want peace or status in your life. They're all good things that are given from God. But when we run into the trouble is that we try and fulfill those desires in a way that doesn't last. In seeking out a relationship, we go from one person to the next, trying to find someone who will finally make us happy. We find ourselves at our job trying to come up with reasons to stay there, to stay involved, to stay invested. We go after material goods, trying to look the best and be the best, so that way we can fit in with the people that we want to. We change ourselves, trying to be part of something better than us, only to realize that when we get into the social circles that we've changed ourselves for, we don't fit in, and we still feel left out, and we feel that hunger come right back in. This gets really bad when we start to feed ourselves on negative emotions, when we use blame as a way to fill this hunger inside of us. You all know people who can never be happy with where they're at. There's people who always have something to complain about. If it's not the annoying coworker at work that they don't like, when they're gone, it's something else. And it's this constant feeding on the negative emotions to try and make themselves feel better about what they're doing and where they're at in their life. These things are all like empty calories, and we fill ourselves up on them. They are things that we go after to fill our desires, but they have no nutritional value for us. They leave us wanting more again and again. When I've been working at church camps for a few summers, and one year I had this kid named Braden. Braden came to me one day, sat at my lunch table, and all he had on his plate was an ice cream and a milk. I said, "Braden, where's the rest of your food?" And he looked at me and he said, "Oh, I don't like that stuff." And so I explained to him, "Hey, we're going swimming later. If you want to have a good time swimming and you don't want to have a stomachache, you have to go and get some other food." So he grudgingly went up to the line, got one hamburger patty and one scoop of vegetables, came back to the table, and then ate half of it. 2 hours later, I'm watching the kids at the beach, seeing if anyone needs any help, and here comes little Braden, holding his stomach. He's got a stomachache, and he's hungry again. Shocker. So we go, and I get him some food, and he actually gets fed, and an hour later, he's back out in the water having the time of his life. The next day, I see him sit down at another table. Again, all he has is dessert on his plate. So I go and I get my boss, who's the director of the camp, who has a little bit more authority, and she sits him down and says, "We're not doing this again today. You have to eat real food. You have to eat food that's going to fill you up and keep you filled up. I know that the dessert tastes really good. It's awesome. I like to eat the dessert too, but you have to eat more than that, and you have to eat a lot more than that, so that way you can have fun later." The story sounds silly, but we do the same thing. We constantly go after those things that we know don't actually fill us up. We realize it. We realize that watching Netflix for 6 hours doesn't actually make us feel any less lonely. We know that the distractions we trace don't actually do anything, and yet we keep going back to them. Maybe we'll realize it for a little bit, and we'll take a break from whatever it is that we're using to try and fill us up, but then we'll go back to it, and we continue to gorge ourselves on empty calories, on things that don't last and don't have any value. As I was thinking through this problem, where our hunger, hold on, I'm getting notes. Is this good? Okay. As I was thinking through this problem of hunger and this never-ending appetite for more, I came across a quote by C.S. Lewis, who is a really impressive thinker and who knows a lot of good things about the human condition. C.S. Lewis says, "If I find in myself desires which nothing in the world can satisfy, the only logical explanation is that I was made for another world." For me in my life, when I was chasing popularity and inclusion and to feel loved, I thought the logical way to get those things and to feel better was to get the more friends and to get more and more status. But I saw that every single time, it didn't hold up. Every single time I needed more and more. And C.S. Lewis reminds me that the reason that these desires are here is because we aren't made for this world. Nothing in this world will ever satisfy that great hunger that we all have. We were made for something else, something lasting, something more. Our hunger is deeper than our physical needs. It is spiritual. It's a hunger for God. The things that we go after, the job and the promotion and the relationship, those are all good things. They fill us up in the moment and they sustain us for a little bit, but ultimately they all fade. They don't have that quality of eternalness that God has. And so as we're searching for a need fill to our spiritual hunger, we need to search in a place that is also eternal, like God. This is not a new problem. People have been wrestling with this since the beginning of time. You know the story of Adam and Eve? Adam and Eve are with God in the garden. God leaves for a little bit and they have everything that they could possibly want. And yet they still go after the one thing that would not fill them up, that would not lead them to more life. And it dooms them. For us in our scripture today, we come up upon a group of people who are seeking Jesus out because they're hungry. They come to Jesus and they hear him teach, and Jesus multiplies bread and fishes for them to eat. And they have their physical hunger filled. The next day, they seek him out again. They're hungry again. They want more food, but also they want something more from him. They are feeling a lack of security in the world, in the system of government that they're having, and so they want him to fill their need and to be their king and to be their leader. They want him to fulfill all these physical things that he can do, that they think he can do. And Jesus says, I'm not going to do that. I gave you bread yesterday. I gave you physical bread. I'm not going to be your king. He says to them this. He says, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never be hungry, and whoever believes in me will never be thirsty. Jesus calls himself the bread of life because he is the only true satisfaction for our hunger. I want you to think about what actual bread does for us. Actual bread is physical. It's something we can touch. We need it every single day, just like we need Jesus every single day. To get the nutrition from food and bread, we have to eat it. We actually have to put it into our bodies. No one has ever gotten full just looking at a loaf of bread. I know some people have joked that they feel full after seeing a whole bunch of food, but no one has actually gotten any value from it. No one has ever baked a cake. I'm hungry for cake today. No one has ever baked a cake and said, oh yeah, I don't need to eat this, I'm full. No one has ever read a recipe book and flipped through it and says, oh, I just read 30 recipes. That's enough for me. I don't need to eat anything today. The same is true for Jesus. We need to really physically involve ourselves with him to eat and to take the nutrition that he has for us. Reading about him is one way to do it. working with Jesus is another way as well, but we actually have to engage and let Jesus change something within ourselves to make changes in our lives and how we see the things and how we see the world. Jesus' use of this I am tells us a little bit of how he does that in a lasting way. This phrase, I am, is based on a phrase that God uses to describe himself all throughout the Bible. He says it to Moses at the burning bush, and he says it in other places. So Jesus re-saying this I am is connecting himself back to God, just like Jesus does throughout the book of John. And so if Jesus is the Son of God, Jesus has that quality of eternalness that we need for our lives. What he has to offer lasts beyond whatever we think is going to fulfill our hunger and our need. So I want to share with you how this might actually look in our lives. Instead of being hungry, when we're hungry for relationship, instead of trying to seek it out in certain groups of people, what if we went to Jesus and were fed by the knowledge that he loves us and that he is our friend always? When we're dissatisfied at our jobs, instead of grumbling about it and feeding ourselves on the negative emotions, what if we went to Jesus and let Jesus teach us that every single place we're at can have meaning, that we can bring good things into our workplace no matter where it is, and that the people that we work with are made in his image, and we can be satisfied with that. What if instead of sacrificing our values to get ahead in business, we let Jesus define what success looks like? Does success look like sacrificing other people to get ahead? No. And we've seen that's true throughout history. Andrew Carnegie and John D. Rockefeller were great business leaders in America. And they built a lot of their wealth really by being hard on their workers. When there were strikes or unions, they broke them up and they got their people to do what they wanted through force. Towards the end of their life, they had accumulated tons of wealth. And they realized, we have all this wealth now, what are we going to do once we're gone? And so they go and they give it, and they spread it around, and they set up a lot of really great foundations that do a lot of good in the world today. But what would have it looked like if they had supported their people and their employees all throughout their life and helped people to build themselves up? We have a couple of ways that we can go to Jesus to let Jesus satisfy our hunger. One thing that we do during the season of Lent is a lot of people take up a practice of fasting, where we give up one thing, whether it's food, social media, it might be sugar, anything. And we give this up for 40 days as we try and connect back to Jesus. By giving up the food or the social media or whatever it is, it creates in us a very noticeable hunger, a want to do the thing that we're used to eat the sugar. And it's a reminder to ourselves that that isn't what fills me up. That isn't what actually provides lasting nutrition and life. What it is Jesus. And so when we fast, we make a little bit more space for Jesus to enter our lives and to use him and to depend on him. Another way that we do this is through silence and solitude. We have so much stimulation in the world, and we're constantly being barraged by advertisements and things going on in our lives. When we take time for silence, it feels really, really weird, because all of a sudden that full amount of stimulation that we have empties, and we're left alone with nothing. And at first, silence is really, really hard because we're not used to that. We're not used to the emptiness. But when we sink into that and we allow that emptiness to take hold and to come to terms with our own hunger for something to do or to hear or to listen to or to see, then we start to let God fill that space in us. And it fills us up for the rest of our day or the rest of our week. For me in my life, God is filling my deep hunger by satisfying my desires for more connection with people. I still struggle with it. I still feel lonely a lot of times. I still want to talk with people with high status and want to be ranked among them. But I find that when I spend time with Jesus intentionally and let Jesus fill me up, when I take that time for fasting or for prayer or for silence, it's a little bit easier that day. I feel that hunger a little bit less. And I allow Jesus to fill me up. And then when I go somewhere and I see a group of people and that urge to talk to people comes, instead of looking for maybe the people at the top, I start to notice the people who are sitting alone a little bit more. And I'm able to share with them and talk to them and share out of my fullness. That doesn't happen every day, that doesn't happen every time, but when it does, that's how I know that not only is Jesus feeding me, but he's helping me to make a difference in the world, a real intangible difference. So what would that look like for you? What could that look like for you? What are you hungry for? What are the things in your life that you chase after, that you spend your time and your energy trying to get? And you realize that what are the things that you do that don't actually satisfy those things, that you've noticed and that you know this doesn't actually fix the problem. It's just a Band-Aid, it falls off, and I've got the problem again. What are those things, and how can you invite Jesus into those things to satisfy your deep hunger so that you can be someone who is full and able to give more of yourself and more to the rest of the world? I want you to think on that and go with that. And I pray that as I work towards replacing my needs and filling them with Jesus, I hope that you can too, and that we can walk this together. Would you guys pray with me? God, help us as we recognize our deep hunger. Help us in all of those spaces where we have desires that are given by you for the wealth, for inclusion, to be loved. Help us to recognize those and to move past them and to chase after them in good ways, that when we feel lonely, we know that we are loved by you. When we are wanting status, we remember that you honor us and that you have counted the hairs on our head. God, help us to go as fuller people today and people who commit to feeding on you and to enjoying and feasting on your love. In your holy name, amen.